Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mechbay podcast, your number one source for everything casual up to competitive tabletop Battletech content. I'm your host, Josh, and back in the Rumble seat today is my wonderful co-host, Dustin.
I got my R&R. I'm ready to roll.
There you go. So, Dustin, fill me in on what Battletech news you've been scouting out in the world since last you were on.
So I saw some previews for the initiative deck. I think it was part of the second wave of the Clan Invasion Kickstarter. Like I've said before, I'm not wrapped up into that one, but I'm still waiting for all that stuff to hit retail. The initiative deck looks and sounds like it might add a lot of flavor to that a kind of dry part of the game, so I'm pretty excited to see what's in there.
What does it really bring to a game?
Boy, I've never used one before, but as far as I can tell, based on some things that I've read on Instagram, following some of the line developers, kind of deciphered some teasers or maybe what their intention is with it, but it might add a little bit of advantages to losing the initiative, might add a little spice to the turn. I really don't know any details, but just a little flavor from one turn to the next, and also to kind of randomize the game a little bit, I'm guessing, is what they're going to do with that. So, I don't know. Have you ever played with an initiative deck you've got more war games under your belt?
I mean, if it is what I think it is, it's the one person has like a advantage, either battle value or points if you're playing an Alpha Strike, and the loser gets like an extra like trump card or something that just gives them a little bit of edge to like mix up the game flavor. If it's just initiative, then it's probably like, hey, if you lost the initiative, you might be able to move an extra this turn, move an extra hex, get a +1 to your firing, sink extra heat, something like that. That
Yeah.
just like mix up the game. So even if you're taking the same mechs and playing the same person, it's a way to keep things fresh. That's what I'm assuming it is, but we will see how they treat this.
Yeah. Spicing up the typical pickup game. Hopefully it'll do that. But we'll find out. Have you seen any of the new sculpts they've been dropping on here and there on the Facebooks and the social medias?
Yeah, so I think we just saw, was it the Clan Striker and the Innersphere Striker Lance?
Yeah, I'm really into that Stalker because, we always need a good Stalker sculpt. I think everybody's been using the Stalker 2 as a proxy. And I'm a personal fan of the Trebuchet, so kind of a derpy sculpt from the Alpha Strike boxes. The new one, the new Trebuchet, looks pretty good, in my opinion. What one's caught your eye?
Probably the Clan ones more so. I've used the Conjurer before, also known as the Hellhound, also known as the Wolverine, but not Wolverine in Clan terms.
The unspoken clan.
Exactly.
The clan who shall not be named or whatever.
So I actually used a Wolverine model and played you against that, and that was a while back when we were doing like a city game, and I really enjoyed the pretty standard equipment on that, just a large pulse laser, some medium lasers, and streak SRMs. Like that was very fun and just like a nicely balanced mech. So to see it actually in nice plastic was kind of unexpected for me.
Yeah, adding some clan tech to those old models, those old chassis that we're kind of familiar with. The 2C line, ain't too shabby. It might not be quite as nice as the Omni mechs, but they're good mechs, not to be underestimated.
If I heard on the Mechbay podcast Hobby Night, you were actually discussing the new Stalker sculpt versus the old one.
Yeah, as in the new one doesn't look like hot garbage in the old one.
Are you really are you calling the flames with the leg sticking out all the way hot garbage?
Yeah, the moonwalk. It's just, I'm pretty sure it's one of the first sculpts in the line. I mean, I think it's got 1986, circa 1986. It's bad. Everybody knows
it's definitely
bad.
An original.
Yeah. The King Crab is kind of weird. It's from the same era, but, it's got a little bit of swagger. It's got that old school, like, War of the Worlds look from late 80s. But the Stalkers, just the pose was not good. The execution is, maybe it was good in its day, but yeah, it'll be welcomed with open arms.
With no preceding mechs, it looks good, but then you see what they've come out with, and it's nice to see that they are modernizing.
And those early mechs were pretty small in scale. The scale creep has, been going over the decades, and the old Stalkers, what's it, 80 ton, 85 ton? I think it's an 85-ton mech, and it's it's no larger than like the Wolverine.
I'll be happy to get those in my hands. There's no bad mech when it's in new plastic, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I saw some of the new rulebook covers very recently, like as of the recording of this podcast tonight. I've only got the Total Warfare book. The old Atlas isn't too unbearable, but I must say the new illustrations for the new books look pretty great. I'll be excited to get my Battle Mech manual with the new. Although the old Timberwolf isn't bad, the new covers look pretty great.
Yeah, that Atlas with the PPC being shot and him taking down like a, what is that? Is that a summoner? No. Yeah, that's a summoner on the ground getting lasered through the
getting
cockpit.
blapped, right? Yeah,
like,
get bonked.
Like that's what you show people when it's like, hey, what rulebook do I need? And you're like, this is the rulebook you need. And it's just killy action right on the front cover, and that's a nice sell.
Good looking stuff. Good art. It helps. It definitely doesn't hurt. I know the classic cover line was good for the folks that played back then, but I wasn't. So I don't have that nostalgia attachment to those old illustrations. They're good, but I like new stuff too.
Oh no, I mean, I picked up the Total Warfare book like at the beginning of quarantine, and I was actually really disappointed that it had the old school Atlas on it. Like, I have a Game of Armored Combat, which has brand new artwork, and I knew like this was like reprint or relatively recent reprint, and it just didn't look appetizing to me.
Yeah, it's an okay illustration, but it's I like the new stuff.
I'm not going to bring a new person in with that cover.
Right.
So we'll move on to hobby progress. So tonight's hobby progress is brought to you by Aries Games and Miniatures. Get your hobby on at ariesgamesandminis.com. So Dustin, we gave you a week / maybe 2 weeks off of recording. So I hope you got a lot of painting, priming, assembling, printing off during that time. So what have you been up to?
I've been printing, fighting my 3D printer. It kind of went dark over lockdown, and I'm just kind of working out all the kinks, getting it back online, printing up that 3D terrain, which we'll talk about a little bit later in the episode. So I think it ate an SD card, so that took it down. My Bowden tube went bad, so it was down for a little bit, but it's up and running again. I don't think I had completely finished and based my Indominus Necrons last we recorded, but they're 100% based, painted. The basing is painted. They're all the way done. And I'm already moving on to some new stuff. I got some Immortals. I got 5 Immortals painted up, not based yet, and I'm working on a Triox Stalker, assembling it right now. In addition to some painting, I had a Thunderhead Studios Trinity City corporate tower, the big one, the centerpiece. I had a second one, so I got that. I got that
boy.
Yeah, the big boy. I got 2 of them now, which is kind of unnecessary, but yeah, I got that airbrushed up, and I can see the difference. I'm gonna maybe go back over some of the older stuff with some new techniques I've learned since it's been a year since I was painting this BattleTech terrain. So I got that.
It's been more than a year.
Has it? Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah. Yeah. How about you? You get anything anything done since your last recording?
Since I last recording, no. I've just cleaned out enough of my hobby room. By me, I mean my wife has cleaned up enough of my hobby room that I can finally put my hobby desk in. I've gotten a couple of games in of Warhammer since then, but
nice.
Still waiting on you to free up your schedule to play some BattleTech.
Oh yeah, soon we'll talk about that too. You kind of unpacked your last box yet in the house? Or you still?
I wish. The downstairs is unpacked. The upstairs is not.
Yep,
so we're working bottom up.
Yeah, I mean it's
definitely a sweep and clear operation.
That's right.
All right, let's take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsors. C-Bills. Too much salvage? Not enough C-Bills? Call Bills for Battle Mechs.
Engines, armors, actuators, even small lasers. The leg actuators connected to the C-bill.
News around the sphere. Things are heating up this week as Joint Federated Suns and Lyran Alliance forces push their way deeper into Karita territory. All of this following Prince Hans Davion's comment stating steps must be taken to deal with the Karita tyranny. And launching an invasion to reconquer lost Avian worlds, the Draconis Combine has stumbled out of the gate in their response. Currently, with the worlds of Anting, New Mintham, and Vega, their garrison forces are being melted away in the face of such serious opposition. In these first 2 months, over 30 worlds have seen their share of battle. We will have to see if things boil over or start to peter out after this speedy start. This is Frank Ferrano with the SBC, bringing you news around the sphere. Today's segment is sponsored by Fortress Miniatures and Games, where you can pick up individual plastic mechs, professionally painted lances, and the new Hex City terrain to fill your tabletop needs. Check them out at fortressminiaturesandgames.com.
So yeah, let's get to the one half of today's, segment. We'll talk about getting back to the table. So, got kids going back to daycare. I'm 100% vaccinated, so we should be getting a game in here soon. What are you most excited to do when you get back to the table and to roll some dice?
Back to BattleTech specifically, I will be very happy to put all of my clan invasion stuff on the table and just try out different lance compositions. Like, I can experiment in my mind and I can experiment in Mega Mech, but actually seeing one fire support mech with one brawler with a scouting one on the table, it kind of just puts all those gears into alignment for me.
Yeah, it completes the picture. Playing against a human, trying out your lists. There's no way to debug your list than to actually put it on the table and see the sheets, roll the dice, play against not Princess. Like Princess, you're great. You got us through some dark times, but not the brightest opponent.
I feel like Princess is only there to get the kinks out of like the actual mech design. Like, oh,
Right.
I didn't realize this mech has this ability or moves this fast or has a fatal flaw. Like, that's what she's good for.
Yeah, I don't even really like taking mechs for a test ride on Mega Mech because I just learned so visually on Tabletop Simulator and then on the tabletop once I found like you guys to play with that like it doesn't even translate. I need to see the bubbles. I need to see the structure. It doesn't read the same way. So I don't even really like testing things out on Mega Mech. Yeah, I'm stoked to get the list armchair list building on the table.
Oh yeah. What about you? Is that what you're most excited about?
Oh, absolutely. I've got new plastic to put on the table. I've painted some stuff up. Now that the game, I know that game will happen. That always encourages me to paint my miniatures. I have the game gets me hyped on painting. The painting gets me hyped on the game. So yeah, I've got new minis to put on the table. I'm excited for that. I'm also excited to start or get back to spreading the BattleTech love. It's really hard to bring in new players in the middle of a pandemic when you can't go to the local game store. I was in the middle. I was actually finishing up setting up a big 4 foot by 6 foot plywood 3D terrain, all Thunderhead Studio stuff. I was getting ready to put that city. I was going to build it at my house, put it in the back of my car, drive to the local game store, kind of set the city on the table as just like, wow, look at this, with a sign next to it and some simple sheets ready to go and be like, ask me about BattleTech. So
I was like, you pretty much took the plan out of my brain. The build a small display board to show off what BattleTech can be. Like something that will grab attention from not just 6 feet away to someone who's been exposed to BattleTech, but to someone who's never done like a miniatures game or
yeah,
a BattleTech property game.
yeah, selling BattleTech to somebody in a local game store is arguably easier than selling like I don't know Warhammer. 60 bucks, everything you need to get started. I even have from that time from my when I was planning on doing those demo games, I had purchased an extra game of Armored Combat box just in case the local game store didn't have one in stock, I wanted to be able to like, give me $60, here it is. I'll order another one from the local game store. I just wanted to have one ready to go for anybody, so they didn't even have to make that decision. Or sorry, so they didn't have any delay to that decision once they made it. It's like, here you go. Here's the crack. Take it home. Get hooked, and we'll see you next week. You know?
I'm like, you're not the middleman. You're like the middleman plus.
Yeah, everything.
You're the street dealer.
Yeah, I'm just ready to sling that BattleTech baby. So I'm hyped on that too.
Yeah, because you were doing pretty good at that, like grabbing people in and showing them the basics. Like you had I don't want to say game plan, but you kind of could tell from when you would talk to them what they were looking for in a miniatures game, and you could kind of sell that part of BattleTech to them.
That just a BattleTech fanboy salesman. Just this is what I love. I'm gonna try to scoop you up and bring you in so I can, so I got more people to play against. Yeah. I think in any war game, a variety of opponents just really keeps it spicy. Keeps it
definitely
fresh. Yeah.
I could play you every day of the week, and I'm not going to say it would get boring, but after a while, I'd start to learn what you were going to plan to do before you did it.
Yeah.
And that's just not as fun.
Yeah. And you get into this whole metagame thing, and you start list building against the opponent because you've been playing them so much. And I mean, there's something to that.
What? Josh only likes to take energy mechs? I'll take all flamers and inferno rounds?
Right. Yeah. Planning the next tournament, I'm also pretty hyped on that. Still not really sure about the timeline, but I've drafted up a mission. We talked about in the tournament episode how missions were kind of lacking for my tournament, so I'm going to start playtesting some missions, and I will be periodically releasing mission plans to y'all, and I'd love some feedback on the missions. So we'll throw those in the show notes, and go ahead and play those missions with your friends, tally them up, score them up, and let me know what the bugs are, or if they were lame, or if they were fun.
Yeah, because as much as I love just 4-on-4 steel cage deathmatch, I really actually enjoy a objective that I can kind of go a step deeper into I'm not just playing a game, I'm commanding 4 mechs, I'm commanding my lance, and their objective, live or die, is to seize this ground, or grab this cash, or rescue the MVP or VIP. I mean,
yeah. I think all of us who've played, 20 or so games of BattleTech know that you got to give the light mechs a reason to be around. Throwing in an objective, of course, a light asset is important in a real world, quote unquote real world, campaign. So bringing in the mission, making it not just, a smash, mech smash. You got to give. You don't have to, but I'd like to give those other mechs a role to play.
Yeah, because I love light mechs for quick, fast, high stakes, high reward games. Nothing's better than jumping 6-7 hexes, landing, aiming, and hitting your one medium laser, but that is enough to take a leg off.
Yeah, and giving them a reason to use their maneuverability for something other than just running circles around, heavier assets and try to get a glancing shot in every now and then is something I'd like to do for the next tournament.
So we'll put our brains together, see what we can spit out, and then we'll dish it out to you once it's ready from the oven.
Yeah. Did I miss anything for you? Anything else you're looking forward to once we get back to the the tabletop, rolling those real dice?
Is there anything else I'm looking forward to besides just playing BattleTech in general? That's a tough one. I mean, I want to say playing BattleTech in general is the first 9 things in my brain.
Yeah, step 1, BattleTech. Step 2,
more BattleTech.
More BattleTech. Yeah, the hype is real. It's going to be great.
Probably just building a display board, kind of showing up the 40K people that go and have their the stores have terrain for 40K.
Yeah, and that's and I look at the pile of beautiful terrain, but my wife might not think of it the same way. And maybe I'll bring it into the local game store at some point when I got it coming out the ears. We'll see. All right, so now for the second half of our segment this week, let's talk about 2D versus 3D terrain. So yeah, we've all played on our map sheets, and that's one way to play BattleTech. Another way is to introduce the third dimension to our games, and there's a couple ways to do that. Do you keep the hexes when you bring in the third dimension? Do you just whip out the tape measures and start measuring? There's a lot to think about. There are rule sets for playing BattleTech as a miniatures game. Obviously, there's Alpha Strike, but we're talking about playing classic BattleTech on two-dimensional versus three-dimensional terrain.
So when you mean three-dimensional terrain, what are you actually talking about?
I'm talking about since there's definitely no, off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure I can say this with confidence, there's zero official BattleTech three-dimensional terrain. So typically I'm going and I'm 3D printing hills or buildings, three-dimensional aspects of a battlefield you would expect to find battle mechs in. So you can add a three-dimensional element to your miniatures games. We got, technically BattleTech, classic BattleTech is a board game, and we can move tokens around our paper, sheets, but we all like to paint our BattleTech miniatures, and the next logical step is to put them around their environment in 3 dimensions, right?
Yeah, you don't want to just represent the mechs, you want to represent the battlefield.
Yeah, it kind of helps with the immersion, I guess.
Definitely gets me into the headspace of I'm actually playing, or I'm actually like at that eye in the sky view of me commanding my lance or my star or something.
Yeah, it's that Mech Commander style, which is what we're doing in the game. We're not playing Solaris. We're not a single mech warrior. We're not. If we're role playing, we might be doing that with like a Time of Warfare or the other role playing system. I can't remember off the top of my head. But if you're playing classic BattleTech, you're fancy yourself, the Lance Commander at least, or maybe the Company Commander, the 3D terrain, like you said. Same thing for me. Really helps me get into the mood to feel the war game, right?
But I mean, you don't have to 3D print things. Like you can use whatever you have available. Like everyone's played some like kind of game like Dungeons and Dragons or whatnot and used whatever is laying around, like foam tray, soda can, box of cereal for a level 1.
Yep. Yeah, and we'll get into that maybe after we go over like some quick pros and cons.
So Dustin, give me the pros of treating classic BattleTech as a board game style game where it's just map sheets and your mechs.
Two-dimensional pros, we've got zero ambiguity. I started with BattleTech. I've played like maybe 2 games of Warhammer, but I hear from the tabletop wargaming community that ambiguity can slow the game down, and it can even be contentious sometimes. There are rules for every situation on the map sheet. There is no ambiguity to line of sight. You're either obscured by you're adjacent to level 2, or you're not. You can either see each other or you cannot. If you're splitting a hex, the defender picks which hex is included. If you're splitting a hex for light woods or something like that. So there's no arguing over anything when it comes to line of sight or how far a mech can move or what the range is on a weapon. You've got hexes, you've got rules. I think that's a plus.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what allows BattleTech to be translated to something like Megamech so easily, because everything is black and white. It's a hard rule if you can see, and it's a hard rule if you cannot see. There's not a whole lot of, well, in this case, go with what your gut says. No, there's a rule in the rule book, and it's not based on how you feel or opinion.
So maybe what's something else you like about the map sheets, Josh?
Well, the fact that I can put them in a binder is definitely a plus. Like the fact that I could leave work with 4 mechs in like a lunch bag and just a clipboard with my map sheets and my record sheets and like 3 or 4 pairs of dice. That was it. Like it's real nice actually.
It's a miniatures war game in a suitcase, like even smaller than that. You can take it on your business trip. If you happen to have cool coworkers who play BattleTech. incredibly transportable. I don't think I've ever seen anybody roll into the local game store playing 40K with any less than one tote, at least two totes, or a bag and a tote full of, your miniatures. And, even if the local game store has terrain, maybe I've seen somebody roll in with one tote, but yeah, where else are you going to get that? Well, there's probably plenty of other games where you can get that, but it's nice. Yeah, very transportable, simple, easy, and fast to set up. You open up the map sheet, you take out your record sheets. You can even run on 2d6. Maybe you've got 3 or 4 sets. Yeah, very, very, very transportable.
I've had coworkers when I tell them it's that I'm going to play BattleTech, they're like, "Hey, you should bring it in and see." And I'm like, "Cool. I literally only need what comes in this starter box, and I can play an actual full legal game of BattleTech. If they want to see what Warhammer is or anything else, I'm like, cool. I'm going to need a 4x6 table. I'm going to need at least 10 pounds of terrain, 800 models, 9 hours to explain the rules to you. Like, it doesn't translate well."
Yeah, and if you take the blister out of the BattleTech box, Game of Armor Combat, you can fit the rest of your map sheet collection in there and some extra miniatures. Being easy to transport, that works in reverse for the house too. 2-dimensional terrain is very easy to store. It doesn't take up any more room than a book on your bookshelf.
That's your wife won't kill you for it.
Yeah, and she won't give you shit about taking up extra room in the closet.
Is that a little too close to home there, Dustin?
Nah, it's okay.
Is it? Be real. Be honest to our listeners.
Oh yeah, no, it's fine.
Is it?
Yeah.
I think I'm trying to dig a little deeper. And have you had any conversations with your wife about if there's too much BattleTech terrain?
Oh, there's the perfect amount of BattleTech terrain. I have precisely as much as I intend to, Josh.
Which is not enough?
Oh, it's never going to be enough. There's been more that's been released. I buy the STL files and I print them out, but we'll talk about 3D in a second. Let's talk about 2-dimensional cons. What's the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they're ugly. Map sheets don't look great.
They can look great, though. It's just the fact that from a distance, you don't get the full grandiose picture of the game.
The newer map sheets do look far better than the older ones do. So I give credit where credit is due, but they still are a little ugly. They just don't have any, like you said, they don't have any wow factor. They don't pop, literally, they don't pop. They're flat on the table. And that kind of leads into my next thing that I don't like about 2-dimensional maps or playing on BattleTech on 2D terrain is it kind of doesn't pull the players in at the local game store,
Not unless they recognize the mechs themselves. But
right.
From 6 feet away, you can't really tell a Mad Cat versus a summoner or something in most cases. My eyes definitely aren't that good.
Unless somebody's seen us at the local game store playing this mystery game for, months on end, the only time somebody comes up to me playing BattleTech is, somebody who knows what it is, and they're like, "Wow, you guys are playing BattleTech. That's rad. I'm going to go, do whatever else I was doing that day." Or somebody knows what BattleTech is, and they're like, "Oh my god, I didn't know that people actually played this," which was you, right? Yeah, it just doesn't. It doesn't pull. It doesn't look beautiful. It isn't 3-dimensional. It just doesn't have that wow factor in the local game store. And I'm always trying to scoop up new players, so that kind of leads me into something I like about the 3-dimensional terrain, which is it's pretty. And in my opinion, it's prettier than the map sheets, and it pulls people in.
So tell me about the 3D terrain. Just give me an overview of all the stuff that you have and just the general what it brings.
Yeah, so I've got pretty much exclusively, that was a lot of words to say nothing. I'm pretty much running Thunderhead Studios STL files. I got my 3D printer at home, and I 3D print his hills. So he has taken some of the 2-dimensional map sheets and kind of 3D sculpted these hills and he's done a decent job of making them look less like hexagons. The first 3D terrain I printed was just literally hexagons, and I would stack the hexagons on a map sheet, and it was a step up, but it was just the first step up. Still kind of ugly, but the natural terrain and the city terrain I have pretty much exclusively Thunderhead Studios stuff. There were some other 6mm scale sci-fi city stuff floating around. There still is plenty of it floating around. I was initially drawn to, I'm going to shill for Thunderhead a little bit here. I was initially drawn to his terrain because you can keep track of where your hexes are on top of the buildings. He's kind of, worked it into the tops of the buildings. And he has a standardized height for everything. So there is a standard 1 hex high, 2, 3, 4. A 5 hex tall building will be the same height as a different 5 hex tall building. I know now that, since we've been firing up the old BattleTech, or I've been firing up BattleTech in my life again, because we're going to be back at the tabletop here soon. I know that Death Ray Designs has also sculpted some 3D terrain that you can order from them. You can also order their STL files and print them on your 3D printer.
They've got the Hex City stuff, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, and they also have some MDF like they typically do. I think they have some MDF terrain as well, which looks neat. I think that stuff is scaled what would be considered small, but I think BattleMechs are too big anyways, because when I look at a 60-ton tank and I look at a 60-ton mech, I think that mechs are too big. But anyways, scale is kind of up to you. But yeah, that's what I've been using is, pretty much exclusively Thunderhead's stuff. So you've seen a lot of it.
But there's nothing stopping you from sculpting your own terrain or bashing your own. It's just you're lazy, and it's really easy for you to just purchase and print.
Yeah, 3D printer go burr, and then I paint the terrain. And, I can spend more time painting. I love painting. And I don't really know. I have some very rudimentary CAD skills, and I'm just not a 3D modeler. So I kind of pay the 3D modelers to do that part for me, and I print the stuff and I paint it. Yeah. But yeah, nothing stopping you from pulling books down, coffee mugs, and just setting up a table and playing 3-dimensional. One thing that playing on 3-dimensional terrain introduces into the game is you immediately roll that ambiguity back in. Technically, using Thunderhead stuff, you could play strictly by the line of sight rules that we use when we use map sheets, but there are dead zones when you're playing on 3-dimensional terrain, and you can say, technically, I can see that mech, but when we've introduced the 3-dimensional terrain, it feels silly, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was the biggest problem when me and you first started playing on the terrain that you brought. Like, I think this was like day 2 that you brought 3D terrain to play with, and I asked, so is this line of sight, or are we doing it by the rules, like black and white?
If I remember correctly, we quickly dropped the rules and went for line of sight, right?
Yeah, that was just because it was a lot of vertical terrain, so we could literally just put our eyes right behind the mech, see if we could see the other mech, and we called it like that. But
yep.
I would definitely say the first thing you have to do when you're playing with 3D terrain in place of the 2D map sheet terrain is you have to ask yourself and your opponent, are we doing this by line of sight, or are we doing this by rules? Because that technically, if a mech is on like level 3 terrain, he can just see down no matter what. But if there's a building in the middle that he has like a tall spire or something that he couldn't see through, you're either going to have to debate that when it comes up, or you're just going to have to iron that out from the get-go. And I definitely recommend ironing it out at the get-go.
Yeah. What else is not so great about playing with 3-dimensional terrain?
Well, definitely first you would need a 3D printer, or know someone with a 3D printer, or be willing to pay.
Yeah, you can pay different print. Steel Warrior Studios sells physical copies of Thunderhead Studios designs. So if you don't have a 3D printer, yeah, you're going to have to pony up to get somebody to print the stuff for you. The barrier to entry, can be a little higher. That's one of the nice things. You show up with your Game of Armor combat box and you're like, let's play a game with a new person. If you tell somebody you got to get a bunch of terrain to play our cool 3D games, it's not going to really fly. So I feel like I ended up playing 3D terrain because I wanted to, if that makes sense. Like, of course, you start off with the map sheets, and then if you want to, you can go into the 3D stuff, right?
I think you had some Warhammer envy, to be honest. I think because we played at a game store with, like I said, terrain specifically for Warhammer or other miniatures games, and then you would come in with your BattleTech, and we'd just play in like the card game section.
Yeah, we would pull out, the 4x6 Warhammer table. We had plenty of room to lay out all of our record sheets and everything, and then we would just play in the center on these 2 flat maps, typically 2 maps. So there's that barrier to entry. There's, I'm a fanboy. I like intellectual properties, as weird as that is maybe for some people, but there's no official 3D terrain, so that's kind of a con. For me, I like a homogeny to my game's aesthetic, and if you have somebody controlling that aesthetic, at least it's all going to look the same, whether or not you like a certain gaming system's terrain. That's a thing for me that might just be for me. And then there's transportation and storage. Lugging around 3-dimensional terrain is diametrically opposed to the advantage of, packing up your map sheets in a folder, right?
I definitely think traveling with terrain is how things get more damaged. I mean, thankfully, BattleTech stuff is a lot more hexagonal in that regard, and it's a lot sturdier for it. But still, things, once you get it painted and printed, it's going to get beat up in the tote or storage unit wherever you're playing.
Yeah. I'm also pretty afraid to put my metal miniatures on my 3-dimensional terrain.
Ooh, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah.
Those are some chunky boys that they do take the foam out of the game stores mats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I've dropped 1 or 2 of my metal ones, and like I see the indentation in the what is it? It's insulation foam, essentially. Is what they use.
Yep. Yeah. So they, if I've got 3D printed plastic, and I put my metal Highlander on the 8th story of my 3-dimensional terrain, which happens, and I was keeping them. I was like, oh man, I don't want to bump that Highlander because, as much pinning as you do to your metal miniatures, they chip so easily. So even if it doesn't explode on impact, my paint job is going to be, kind of blown up wherever the miniature hits the table. So that's
just another negative for 3D terrain in general is you're going to put your miniatures in weird places that they probably weren't designed to go.
Yeah. And
corners, they're going to be, quote, wobbly model, and they're going to be on things, and the base isn't going to be resting perfectly flat. So there's going to be a lot of risk of them falling.
Yeah.
And that's just something you have to come to peace with if you're playing like that.
Yeah. The plastic miniatures, much more resilient. I'm more apt to put the Kickstarter mechs on my 3D terrain. And maybe I just kind of keep the metal stuff for map night, when we're playing on our... And we switch back and forth, right? Like, even after I'd printed up all that stuff, I felt like some nights we'd play 3D and some nights we'd play 2D because, advantages to each, right?
Because we didn't want to spend 2 hours assembling your city of, well, this hex has to go this way because the road lines are going this direction.
It's true. It's why I had kind of purchased a piece of wood, and I was like, I need to build the cities at home because it takes too long. It takes like a half hour to put the city together.
Ooh, half hour? Look at this guy. Look at time moving slower when he assembles things.
Oh boy, yeah. I guess I was in the thick of it, so yeah. That's another disadvantage to the 3D stuff is if you don't have, and perhaps more for the Thunderhead terrain, city stuff. If you have the hills, you can just kind of put a couple of hills down, and that wouldn't be so long. or so bad for the setup. Just like throwing some scatter terrain around. But for the city, I was really into the city stuff. I probably still am. The city fight is just like, I don't know. I was kind of hyped on it, and yeah, it takes forever to set up.
So tell me about like the perfect table for if you wanted to like run a tournament with 3D terrain on it.
Oh, I don't know if that exists. The having run one BattleTech tournament, I don't know if I'd want to introduce the ambiguity. One, that's like one of my favorite things about the 2D maps. So my perfect table, I guess I would establish the rules ahead of time with the players. Are we using line of sight, or are we playing by the book, even though it looks silly on 3-dimensional terrain? Where mechs clearly don't have line of sight, they would technically have line of sight if you're doing it by the book. So I would clear that up first, and then are the tables identical? Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment. I frankly have not thought of that yet. You have any ideas yourself?
Yeah, I would say if you're doing like a competitive tournament scene, I would stay away from the 3D terrain just because A, you're going to have to supply all of the 3D terrain. And at that point, just play Alpha Strike. Like, I don't
Yeah,
mean to say it like that, but 3D terrain ambiguity is fine with Alpha Strike because it's designed for it.
yeah, and that's the thing. Remember this whole section is in the context of playing classic BattleTech on 3-dimensional terrain. If you just play Alpha Strike, it's built into the rules, which is great. And I have played some Alpha Strike on some 3-dimensional terrain. It's good. It's good stuff.
The other part of it is if you're playing a competitive BattleTech, like I would say rather than 3D terrain, quote unquote, I'd say 3D topographic map. Like you don't need 1 inch for a level 1 and 2 inches for a level 2. Just a little rise to go from level 0 to level 1, then like another millimeter or two to go from level 1 to level 2, just to
Oh,
add
that
a
could be
little
nice.
bit of extra pizzazz to the map sheets. That's something that can really set a game apart.
Yeah, now that we're talking about it more, I think running the Thunderhead 3-dimensional hills with the actual rules for line of sight would be pretty good. I might do that actually. So yes, there you have it. If I were to run 3-dimensional terrain in a tournament, I would use those because there are map sheets with corresponding. You take the hill and you stick it on the 2D map where it belongs. Right? That's how he sculpted those. So
Yeah,
it is
you're
a
just building up the actual map sheet with the
yeah,
map sheet's actual terrain.
yeah. You stick the terrain on the map. It's actually pretty good.
So that's how I would do it. I would prefer a topographic map style, like just
Yeah,
1 or 2 millimeters and then 3 or 4 for another level. Something where I'm not actually like worried about my dice being too interfered and like putting mechs multiple inches high that they can fall over and hit other mechs, because that's a big thing. If my mechs hit my mechs, it's okay. If my mechs damage their mechs, that's a no-no.
yeah, yep,
So you don't need to get crazy to really improve the aesthetic of the table.
yeah. So yeah, kind of meet it in the middle. Do 2D but 3-dimensional, right? Yeah, the best
I
of
will
both worlds.
I will say like my dream 3D terrain is just a clear plastic fits over the map sheet I'm using, and it's just that map sheet kind of exploded upward.
Oh, that would be hip.
Would We'll never see it, but if so, you heard it here first.
Yeah, you already brought one dream to reality. No need to do another one, right?
What was that dream?
The podcast.
Oh, okay. No, I had to beat up three atlases in a dark alley to get the rights to this podcast. Like, no,
That's yeah. No.
that wasn't a dream. That was suffering.
It's pain and anguish.
But I'd say again that 3D terrain, I don't think will replace the map sheets anytime soon. I think
Yeah,
it's just another way to introduce something different to kind of spice up the game night.
yeah, yeah. And I was introducing that. That's definitely casual game situation with people, ahead of time. Like, hey, do you want to play on the 3D stuff, you might be like, nah, I want to pack my maps. I I want to go light today.
You had it all, and even some nights we were like, let's not do that, just because
Absolutely.
it throws too much into the equation, and that's not what I'm looking for every time I play BattleTech.
Yep. So yeah, advantages to each, but if it's something you want to explore, it can add some pizzazz to your game.
Anything else for that?
No, I think we've covered it all pretty well.
You say that, but so we talked a lot of terrain game today, but if you want to get your own 3D terrain and don't want to build it from scratch, you can find terrain from Death Ray Designs' Hex City collection, and soon home to be of Steel Warrior Studios' Hex Tech collection, Industrial Fluid Works bundle, and the Delta Base collection at Fortress Miniatures and Games. You can find Hardware Studios 3D terrain and dropship at Ares Games and Miniatures. All right, so Justin, I asked you to bring me a Lance to review, something that we hadn't done in a while.
Yeah, so bringing the segment back, Lance in review. So you kind of asked me to take a Lance maybe from 3025 and in the spirit of Helm Memory Core, kind of upgrade those mechs, right?
Yeah. So what have you brought to me?
So I've got a Dragon 5N. This is a shooting for 5,000 battle value. So I brought a Dragon 5N, a Battle Master 3M, a Jenner K, and a Centurion D. So I picked these mechs because, the Dragon N kind of switches out that AC5. We always want the Dragon to punch a little harder. Well, why not potentially double its firepower? You're actually getting like 1.4x because those UACs aren't always hitting. You need that 8 up to get both the rounds. But I think the Dragon 5N also runs some double heat sinks, which is nice to see. A cold mech.
Nope, just standard.
No, standard heat sinks. Okay.
Standard heat sinks, but it does get rid of the rear medium laser, so
yeah,
it puts all that damage forward.
Yeah, why would you put a rear-facing medium laser on a skirmisher / sniper? Let's be frank, right? Cavalry, right? Yeah. It never made sense. So yeah, switch out that Battlemaster for that 3M. So this is a Free Worlds League design, Earthworks manufacturing plant, but it's salvage. Let's replace that PPC with an ER PPC. Your Battlemaster is a brawler, and I'm always leery of that minimum range on your PPCs. So upgrading that to an ER PPC is great. I do believe this one does upgrade to double heat sinks.
Yeah, this one has double heat sinks, and it has case for that ammo.
Yeah, I think it's just the SRM, right? I think this might drop the machine guns, or maybe it just
drops one of the machine guns, because you can't get rid of all the machine guns.
Yeah, you got to be able to, blast those poor bloody infantry. The 7K, the JR7K, is an interesting upgrade. They switched out the armor for Pharaoh, but then they reduced the armor. So you actually have the same coverage, but you gain like a ton or a half a ton, and you throw on case for that SRM ammunition. So this is a cheap add, 889 battle value, but it is an upgrade. If you're in the internal structure, your Jenner's already in trouble, but it gives it just a tiny bit of survivability. And then the Centurion D, let's switch out that AC10 for that always better in every way LBX10, and throw some Artemis on that. Did I say LBX or LRM? Yeah, switch out the AC10 for the LBX10 and throw Artemis on the LRM10. And that's great. I think all of that weight savings is afforded by an XL engine. Inner sphere XL engines kind of make your mech more squishy, but a little extra punch at the cost of survivability. So yeah, what do you think about the Lance?
I definitely like it. I still always struggle to see the purpose of a dragon, but in a Karita Lance, this is
you gotta have it, right?
This would have to be there. Like, if the Battle Master isn't the one leading it, the dragon is the morale officer, essentially.
Yeah, you could argue that with the maneuverability, you could put the, I forget the equivalent of the officer in the Draconis military. Shosa. I'm probably butchering all of that, but yeah, he's in the maneuverable. Dragons have decent survivability. They're fast, so throw your commander in the dragon, keep him alive and on the outskirts of the battle, or throw him in the battle master, which is literally a command mech, right? This one doesn't have the console, but yeah.
But yeah, I definitely like the Battle Master. It with the ERPPC. This is one I've run before, and I know that that extended range is real nice to let you fire those first opening turns of the game.
Yeah.
Because when most people are trying to maneuver, they're still in line of sight, but that's something that can reach out and touch, or at least has a better chance of touching you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
affecting how the game's going to play from that point on.
If it's out of range, you can't even roll the dice, and if you can't roll the dice, there's not even a chance of hitting. So
yeah, the Centurion I definitely like because it can essentially work with the Battle Master. The Battle Master makes the holes, and the Centurion kind of exploits them. It's got the LBX 10, it's got the cluster ammo, it's got the Artemis 4 for more cluster hits. So
yeah,
the Centurion's the one who's exploiting any holes you make in mechs.
Yeah, this lance has, and I'd love to put this on the table and actually see how it performs. I feel like between the Jinner and the Dragon, it might have a little too much on the flanks. I don't know. I like to have a really solid center to my lance, and I feel like the Battle Master and the Centurion, they can hold their own. I don't know, but I'd really like to put it on the table and see. I'm not familiar with some of these chassis.
I think this
variants.
is a lance that really excels at sweeping both of your flanks to kind of encircle you, so there's no good target.
Yeah, target saturation with the Jinner and the Dragon.
Yeah, you've got 2 fast mechs and 2 slower fire support mechs.
Yeah.
So the Dragon and the Jinner are definitely going to run up the flank, kind of poke at you, see where you're weak, make you think about what you're going to do next, while the Centurion and the Battle Master are slowly moving up more in the middle field.
Yeah.
And they're the ones doing the heavy punches. While you're looking at the Jinner and the Dragon, the Battle Master and Centurion are doing the work.
You want to give your opponent some hard decisions between the Centurion and the Battle Master and the Dragon and the Jinner, maybe getting on the flanks or maybe even in the rear arcs. Do I ignore the Jinner? Is the squishy glass cannon? Do I start chipping away at the Dragon? That's going to be in medium range at least, with some high to hit numbers, or do I try to take on all that armor, all that mass in the center of the field with the Battle Master and the Centurion?
Yeah, that Dragon really, it's weird because it has weapons that want to be a little bit longer range, but it's fast enough to get in there, kind of knock you on your butt, and then keep moving but past you.
Yeah,
and that's something you can really exploit with that.
I think I've only had a Dragon, not the Lost Tech version, but the one in, or I think it's called, the bare bones, the rear facing laser Dragon. And I think both times I put it on the table, I've made the mistake of getting it in, and it gets blasted. It doesn't have the jump jets, so it's somewhat maneuverable. 5.8 is pretty maneuverable, but without any jump jets. I felt like I've mismaneuvered my Dragons.
It's not a brawler, and a lot of people, I think, get stuck in to the thought that it is because it has armor and it has speed and it has not great weapons, quote unquote. So that kind of forces it to brawl and kick and punch, but that's not really what it's meant for. It's meant to open up at medium long range, keep firing, and then just run past you as the second wave of your lance hits them in the front.
Yep. Kind of dictate that. It has the maneuverability to try to dictate the engagement range, so, play to its advantage, which is that medium to long range for most other mechs. You're going to be in medium range, ideally, while what you're shooting at is in long range, right?
Yeah, this is not something that I would be worried about not jamming my autocannon 5. I'd say that's free real estate the whole time that I'm shooting at you.
Yep. Yeah, I'd be opening up with that thing. Live or die, right?
Where can you see this lance probably excelling? On an open field, urban, exotic, something like that?
I think it's diverse. You don't have a lot of jumping. but it could. I feel like this lance could hold its own on a rolling hills situation because you've got the Battlemaster and the Centurion. They're both 4/6. That's not fast, but for an assault mech, that's not slow. And the Dragon and the Jin are going to be able to maneuver in position. I think they would do okay in a city fight. The Jinner's got its jump jets to really pop in, deliver. So it can do what a Jinner wants to do, right? It's a hot mech with too many weapons, so jump in, have a high mod, deliver all of your weapons and your firepower, jump out, cool off. I feel like the Dragon's going to suffer the most in the city environment. You want to be at long range, but everybody can hide, and you don't have jump jets. So that's going to be rough. The Centurion and the Battlemaster, they've got the armor, right, to kind of dictate the engagement in the city. But you still have to be careful with them because they don't have the jump jets.
Yeah, I would definitely say this is much more of that rolling hill or open plains kind of lance.
Yeah.
Where they can put their speed where the maneuverability of jump jets isn't really needed because you would just be using it to get a mod rather than trying to move around terrain.
Yeah.
I do think that's a much more Kurita style for fighting, so I really think that fits the lance. Are there any things that you would have exchanged with any of these mechs, but that you had to debate on?
Not really. Personally, I do run for sort of light. Not really. When I run Kurita, I'm running Dark Age mechs, so I actually had to dig a little bit, to make this kind of fluffy list. Now that I've made the list, I'm kind of interested in putting it on the table, but I didn't know enough about these variants and these Kurita style mechs. I play some Legion of Vega, in the pre-invasion era. I was just mostly looking, doing the research, trying to make an upgraded Kurita lance. So it was really Dragon versus Grand Dragon, but I think the Grand Dragon is very late, almost.
Yeah, that. I think that started in 3040 and didn't really see production until 3050. So that's right on the edge of full clan invasion versus just starting to upgrade.
Yeah, when I was getting in the headspace to make this fluffy list, I was like, I'm a Draconis Combine, connected noble, and the Hell Memory Core's, been discovered, and I'm gonna trick out my mechs, with the latest and greatest models. So that's kind of how I went into this.
But none of this is what I would consider crazy outlandish and revolutionizing the actual chassis. These are just slight tweak upgrades to improve an already decent design at what it does.
I like variants that are a different idea on the same flavor of mech. There are later and more esoteric variants of, there's a hunchback running around out there that's a 5/8, and I'm like, sorry, that's just weird for me for a hunchback. So I get pulled away from variants that really, really change the character of a mech, a chassis that I'm already familiar with. So I kind of like these. Just take out the AC10, LBX10, right? These are some straight upgrades, or maybe with the the Jinner is kind of a side grade. It's got case, it's got the same amount of armor. It's more expensive on the tabletop by the numbers. It's probably an upgrade. But yeah, the 3M, switch out the PPC for an ER PPC, right? Put the latest and greatest model in there.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I might swap the Jinner for a Panther 10K.
Yep.
And that's the one with the Indo Steel, the Artemis 4 for the SRM launcher, and an ER PPC.
Yeah, nice.
And that's a straight replacement for the Jinner PV wise, essentially.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's 838 versus the Jinner's 889, so it's actually cheaper.
Yeah, and you might be able to squeeze in something heavier on the top end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had Jinners get eaten by wolfhounds too frequently, and I'm kind of leery of that that mech these days.
Yeah, I think swapping the Jinner for the Panther though would swap the feel of the lance itself to a more long-range skirmisher.
Absolutely.
Rather than a cavalry pincer lance.
Yeah, this is a maneuverable lance. That with the Panther, you've got 3 mechs with, a 4/6 something profile, and that's definitely going to pull it into, fire support or, mobile fire support, right?
Yeah. Yeah, with 2 ERPPCs and an LBX-10, that's
UAC
definitely
5,
yeah.
2 sets of LRM-10s. Yeah, that's wandering into fire support territory. If I'm running a company, that's great. But if I'm just bringing the lance to the table, I 0.5 to 1, total, fire support mechs.
I know you love them. I know you can't get rid of them.
I know. I have to fight myself. You could see a catapult in this list, but then what's the ERPPC on the Battlemaster for besides just closing, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I put that Panther in, the Centurion would get swapped to something faster.
Okay.
What? I don't know yet. I'd have to think about it. But
Yeah.
having a light and an assault do the long range and a medium and a heavy doing the up close, fast, and personal, I could see that working. But no, thanks. It's still a great list, so thanks for bringing it to me. And if any of our listeners have any questions about it, feel free to send them so we can debate and prove why you're wrong.
Yeah, I think a next list review should be from one of our listeners.
So if you've got one that you want us to dig deep, give our thoughts on, send it to us, and we'll sink our teeth into it.
Yeah, and kind of pick it apart and give our opinions, do our armchair general impression on your list, and then soon we can put it all on the table and see how it actually works.
So Dustin, I'd like to thank you again for coming on today to talk about 2D terrain versus 3D terrain and a way to spice up your pickup games versus a way to pull some eyes in to the table.
It's a pleasure as always.
And thank you again for bringing your Karita Lance. I can't wait to see it on the tabletop.
Soon. Like very soon.
If you like what you heard today, feel free to support us on Patreon at patreon.com/themechbaypodcast.com. If you'd like to talk with us directly, you can join us on our Discord, which you can find linked on our Facebook page at facebook.com/themechbaypodcast. Or you can email us at themechbaypodcast@gmail.com.